In the middle of a long, crazy Lagos traffic jam, something unbelievable happened. A young billionaire suddenly stepped out of his shiny black Mercedes and, shockingly, held the hands of two dirty beggars sitting by the roadside. Before anyone could blink, he opened his car door and helped them in, both of them. People screamed, horns blared, phones came out, everyone shouting, "Wait, why would a billionaire carry two beggars into his car?" But what happened next will leave your heart trembling. Subscribe now and grab your seat, besties. You're about to witness a story that proves life can turn around in the most unexpected way. That morning, the Lagos sun was already blazing like it had a personal grudge against humanity. Horns blared, hawkers shouted, and conductors argued like they were auditioning for Best Shouter of the Year. But inside one car, peace reigned. A sleek black Mercedes-Benz Maybach, polished so perfectly that even dust particles were too shy to land on it, crawled slowly through the traffic. Inside sat Richard Daniels, 25 years old, wealthy, sharp, and coldly calm, the kind of man whose silence made people nervous. The AC hummed softly, shielding him from the chaos outside. The smell of leather, mixed with imported cologne, gave the car that "I'm richer than your landlord" atmosphere. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored Italian suit that screamed money. A silver Rolex on his wrist caught the sunlight each time he raised his hand, as though reminding anyone who cared to look that this was no ordinary young man. He sat at the back, laptop open on his knees, going through slides for his upcoming board meeting at Dancorp Holdings, one of Nigeria's biggest companies. His driver, Mr. Patrick, maneuvered carefully through the never-ending queue of cars on Ikoyi Bridge. Lagos traffic was the same, a great equalizer. No matter how rich you were stuck in it with everyone else. The sweating Danfo driver, the angry banker, and the frustrated hawker chasing change. Richard sighed quietly, glancing at his gold wristwatch. "At this rate, I'll walk faster than this car," he muttered. Mr. Patrick chuckled nervously. "Oga, e go soon clear. Na small holdup remain." Richard ignored him and refocused on his presentation. That was typical of him. All business, all the time. That same drive had taken him from sleeping in a cramped boys' block quarters years ago to owning 3 estates in Lekki. Then suddenly, tap tap. A faint knock on the glass. He didn't even look up. Lagos beggars were everywhere, and he'd long mastered the art of selective deafness. But then came the sound again, this time softer, followed by a trembling voice. "Please, my son, just something to eat. God will bless you." The voice wasn't loud, but something in the tone, fragile, broken, yet strangely familiar. Richard frowned and looked up, and there, right outside his tinted window, stood an old man and a woman, their clothes tattered, their faces weathered by years of pain. The man's beard was gray, and his feet were bare. The woman clutched a small bowl, her hands shaking. They were begging. For a moment, Richard just stared. Something in his chest tightened, a strange ache he hadn't felt in years. He blinked, trying to focus, but the faces outside refused to blur away like every other beggar's. The man leaned closer to the car, peering through the glass. "Please, sir," he said again weakly, "anything small, even water." And that's when the world around Richard went silent. The honking horns disappeared. The shouting hawkers vanished. Even the AC's hum seemed to fade away. He knew that face. His father's face, and standing beside him, his stepmother. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. His throat went dry, and his laptop almost slipped from his hands. 13 years. It had been 13 long years since he last saw them. Since he'd walked away with nothing but a backpack and tears he swore he'd never shed again. Now, here they were, in rags, begging for food on the very streets he drove through in a 90 million car. Life really had a wicked sense of humor. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as his vision blurred with tears. He quickly rolled down the window and warm air rushed in. "Sir," Mr. Patrick said, confused. "Everything okay?" "Stop the car," Richard said quietly. "Here, sir? In this traffic?" I said stop the car. The driver obeyed, pulling to the side. Richard stepped out, his polished shoes meeting the hot, dusty road. People around turned to look. After all, it's not every day a billionaire jumps out of his car to talk to beggars. The old man flinched slightly, probably thinking this rich stranger was about to chase him away. Have you eaten today? Richard asked softly. The woman shook her head, avoiding his eyes. Not today, sir. Not even yesterday. We just manage water. Richard's heart twisted. For 2 days? The man nodded. Yes, sir, but God is good. We will eat when it is time. Richard turned to his driver. Patrick, come. We're taking them somewhere. Sir? You heard me. He helped the old couple gently, one on each side, while the traffic around continued its noisy orchestra. Some passers-by even murmured, Ah, see as this big man they follow beggar. He no get work? But Richard didn't care. He guided them carefully into the car. The woman hesitated. Ah, Oga, this car too fine. We no fit enter. Please, ma, he interrupted gently. Just get in. They sat awkwardly, afraid to touch anything. The smell of their unwashed clothes filled the air, but Richard didn't flinch. He looked at them, truly looked. His father had grown frail, his shoulders bent like life had weighed him down. His stepmother's hands trembled as she tried to hide her face in shame. Take us to a restaurant, Richard said to his driver. Within minutes, the Mercedes pulled up in front of a fancy eatery in Ikoyi. The moment they stepped in, all conversation stopped. Everyone stared, a billionaire in a spotless suit, walking in with 2 beggars. The waiter rushed forward, confused. Good afternoon, sir. Table for 3? Yes. Bring food, Richard said. Everything, and please make it quick. They were seated and plates began to arrive, steaming rice, grilled fish, fried chicken, bottled water. The old couple stared at the food like it was gold. Eat, Richard said gently. They hesitated. Please, he urged. Eat. Slowly they began. First cautious bites, then faster ones. They ate like people who had been starving for a century. Richard sat across the table, his hands folded, his eyes glistening. He didn't touch his food. He just watched. At some point, the old man paused, wiping his mouth. Sir, he said quietly, may God bless you. People pass us every day and pretend not to see. But you stopped. You fed us. Why are you crying? Richard quickly wiped his tears and forced a smile. It's nothing, sir. Just something in my eye. The man nodded, grateful. Even this little mercy today, God will repay you. Richard swallowed hard, his heart breaking. If only they knew. If only they knew that the stranger who stopped to feed them was their own son. He looked down at his trembling hands and whispered under his breath, Not today, not yet. They're not ready to know. Then he steadied himself, trying to keep his emotions in check. Without revealing who he truly was, he cleared his throat and asked softly, Baba, how did you end up like this? You're old. This isn't where you should be. Don't you have children? The old man let out a deep, shaky sigh. His eyes dimmed, and his voice broke as he said, My son, this is what happens when a man's pride and foolishness walk hand in hand. What you're looking at now is the result of my sins and my wife's greed. He took a long pause, then began, almost whispering his confession. I used to be somebody in this city. People once called me Chief Johnson Daniels, a big businessman. Money was never a problem. I had 2 children with my first wife, Grace, Richard and Anita. But after Grace died, loneliness ate me up, and I married a younger woman named Stella. He chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. Stella, ha! She came into my life smiling like an angel, but home upside down. I even knew what hit me. He coughed, looked at the dusty ground, and continued. One week, I traveled to Port Harcourt for business. When I came back, my world had scattered. Stella, he looked at his wife, seated beside him, and shook his head slowly. This my wife told me that my children, my own son and daughter, had stolen 15 million from my safe and run away. Richard felt his throat tighten, his fingers trembling as his father continued, not knowing the man standing before him was the very son he was talking about. At first, I refused to believe it. But she cried, rolled on the floor, swore by heaven that she caught them red-handed. Anger blinded me, son. I said terrible things that no father should ever say. I cursed those innocent children and told Stella, good riddance. They're gone, and may they never return. The old man's lips quivered, and his eyes filled with regret. 3 months later, one of our housemaids ran into me in the market. The poor girl couldn't hold it anymore. She told me the truth, that Stella gave the money to her useless brother to start a business, and she framed my children to cover up her wickedness. He wiped his tears with the edge of his worn-out shirt. You'd think I'd go searching for them, right? But I didn't. I couldn't even look for my children because deep down, I'd failed them long before that day. I wasn't a good father. I left them to be raised by a woman who hated them, and I closed my eyes when they cried. Maybe that's why God closed his eyes on me too. He exhaled shakily. From that day, everything started falling apart. My company collapsed like a house built on cards. Contracts disappeared, partners betrayed me, loans piled up. I sold everything. The cars, the mansion, even the chairs in the living room, until we were left with nothing but the clothes on our backs. Now, this, he gestured weakly at his tattered clothes and begging bowl, is where my pride brought me. 10 years on the streets, surviving on people's pity. The old man gave a weak smile, his lips trembling. When my children left, my son was just 12, my daughter 10. Maybe they're grown now. Maybe they're even richer than Dangote. I just wish, his voice cracked, before I die, I could ask for their forgiveness. Just once. Richard's vision blurred. His throat felt dry and his chest burned with guilt and heartbreak. Every word from the old man's mouth was like a knife slicing through him. He looked at the woman sitting quietly beside his father, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling. Stella, the stepmother. Her hands shook as she left her food untouched. Richard gently pushed a glass of water towards her. "Ma, drink something," he said softly, struggling to keep his voice calm. She took the glass with trembling hands and whispered, "Thank you." Then she broke down completely. "I don't deserve your kindness, sir," she said, her voice barely audible. "I was a wicked woman. My greed destroyed that family. I thought I was smart, using my husband's trust to chase away those children. But look at me now. Nothing left but shame and dust. Sometimes when I try to sleep, I hear their little voices calling me mummy. I used to hate that sound, but now I'd give anything to hear it again for real." Her tears fell freely, and she clutched her chest as she continued. "My only wish before I die is to find them, just to kneel down and say sorry. That's all. Maybe then my soul can rest." Richard's heart twisted painfully. He wanted to scream, to cry, to tell them, "I'm the boy you threw away." But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he took a deep breath, swallowed the storm raging inside him, and simply said, "God works in mysterious ways, sir. Sometimes he breaks us, just to rebuild what we lost." The old man nodded slowly. "You're right, my son. You're very right." Patrick, standing quietly nearby, had seen many emotional moments in his life, but this one, he silently turned away to wipe his eyes. He didn't even know what to feel anymore. Richard looked at the two broken people before him, the same people who had once thrown him to the streets, and he whispered to himself, "Not yet. Let them eat, let them rest. They will know who I am soon enough." He sat quietly for a moment, his heart thudding like a drum. Then after a while, he finally asked in a calm voice, "Sir, did you ever have any other children after that? Maybe someone you could lean on?" The old woman sighed so deeply that it seemed her soul deflated with it. "Ah, my son," she said weakly, "after we threw those two children away, God shut our womb. No matter how we tried, herbalists, pastors, doctors, home and abroad, it was all useless. We wanted a child so badly. But heaven refused to bless us again. I guess God looked at what we and said, 'You don't deserve another chance.'" She gave a dry laugh that quickly turned into tears. "Now see us. From the mansion in Akajagare to sleeping on pavements near Ohualegba Bridge. That's how far pride can drag a person down. Richard felt his throat tighten. He took a deep breath and said, "You've been through a lot, but by God's grace, I lack nothing. I'd like to help. Please, let me take care of you both." At first, they stared at him in disbelief, but when he repeated it, the two of them broke down completely. Johnson, the old man, fell to his knees right there in front of the restaurant, crying, "May heaven bless you, my son. May your generations never know lack." Even Patrick, the driver, who had been pretending to be focused on parking, blinked away tears. Richard gently helped the old man up. "No, please. You don't kneel. Come, both of you." He opened the door of his sleek black Mercedes, and they hesitated for a second, unsure if they were even worthy to sit inside such luxury. But he smiled warmly. "Please, get in. Don't worry about the seats. They can be cleaned." Patrick drove slowly through the city, the car gliding past rows of traffic and dusty pedestrians. The beggar couple sat silently, overwhelmed by the smooth leather seats, the air conditioning, and the surrealness of it all. When they reached the tall gates of Richard's mansion, Stella gasped so loudly that Patrick chuckled under his breath. "My God," she whispered, clutching her chest. "Who lives here? The governor?" Richard smiled faintly. "Someone who believes in second chances." The massive gates opened, revealing a mansion so grand it looked like it had been borrowed straight from a billionaire's dream. The compound was covered in perfectly trimmed lawns, glowing lights, and a water fountain dancing in the middle. "Welcome to your new home," Richard said softly. They both froze at the door, staring wide-eyed at the polished marble floors and the chandelier that sparkled like captured stars. "You'll stay here," he said, leading them into a large, cozy room on the ground floor. "I'll take care of your food, your clothes, everything you need. You don't have to beg again." The old man's lips trembled. "Young man, may God reward you beyond imagination. I've never seen such kindness in my life." Just then, an elderly man with a warm smile entered the hallway. His name was Mr. Raymond, Richard's foster father, the man who had raised him. "Richard," he said, smiling, "I heard voices. What's going on?" Richard turned to him, a mix of emotion in his voice. "Father, I met them on the roadside. They were starving. I couldn't leave them there. I want them to stay here." Raymond nodded proudly. "Ah, that's my son. You've always had a heart of gold. I'm proud of you." When Johnson heard the name Richard, his eyes widened. "What did you say your name is again?" Richard quickly smiled, trying not to give himself away. "Ah, sir, it's just Richard. My friends call me that." But the old couple's curiosity was already burning. Johnson looked at Raymond and said, "Sir, your son's name, Richard. It sounds familiar. My lost boy's name was also Richard. It's just... he'd be about your son's age now if he were alive." Richard swallowed hard. His heartbeat raced, but he forced a polite smile and diverted the topic. "Please, you both need rest. Everything else can wait." The next few days passed quietly. Johnson and Stella began settling into their new reality. They wore clean clothes, ate proper meals, and finally slept on soft beds again. They were treated with more kindness than they'd known in years. A week later, while Richard was at Dancorp Holdings, Raymond sat in the garden with Johnson. They had become close friends, often chatting over morning tea. "Brother Raymond," Johnson said, leaning forward, "you're a blessed man. Your son Richard is a good man. I've never seen anyone so generous." Raymond smiled sadly. "Ah, my brother, I wish I could say he was my blood, but he's not. I never married. 15 years ago, I found that boy on the streets near Sur-Lair with a little girl beside him. They were crying in front of a restaurant." Johnson's cup froze midair. "What?" he whispered. "Yes," Raymond continued, unaware of the storm building in Johnson's chest. "When I asked what was wrong, the boy said, 'Uncle, my sister hasn't eaten in 3 days. Please buy food for her.' I couldn't walk away. I fed them, took them home, and raised them as my own. Later, I found out their stepmother had thrown them out, and their father was away on business at the time." Johnson's hands began to shake violently. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and tears rolled down his wrinkled cheeks. "Dear God," he whispered, clutching his shirt. "Could it be? Could it be my son?" The room was silent, the kind of silence that screams louder than thunder. Even the ticking wall clock seemed to hold its breath. Johnson Daniels, the frail old man with eyes tired from begging and regret, turned shakily toward Raymond and asked in a trembling voice, "Brother, where is that girl now? I mean his younger sister." Raymond smiled gently, unaware of the storm brewing in Johnson's chest. "Oh, you mean Anita?" he said proudly. "Anita's married now, happily married to a wonderful young man. He's an architect, works with one of the biggest firms in Lagos. They live comfortably. She's my beautiful daughter, my pride, and she often visits with her husband. Richard and Anita gave me a new purpose. Both of them are my world." But as Raymond spoke, he noticed something off about the old beggar. Johnson's hands began to tremble. His breathing became shallow, and tears welled up in his eyes. He stammered, "Wait, did you just say Richard and Anita are siblings and are not your blood?" Raymond nodded, still smiling. "Yes, Richard Daniels, the CEO of Dancorp Holdings. That young man you saw earlier, he's my boy, but not my blood." Johnson's eyes widened. His cracked lips trembled as he whispered, "Richard Daniels? Why? Do you know him?" Raymond asked, confused. Johnson let out a painful laugh, the kind of laugh that carried years of regret and guilt. "Know him?" he said weakly. He's my son." Raymond's smile faded instantly. "What are you saying?" "My son," Johnson shouted now, his voice breaking. "Richard is my blood. His mother was my late wife, Clara. And that woman," he pointed toward Stella, who was standing frozen in shame, "is his stepmother. We threw him and his sister out years ago." Raymond blinked in disbelief. "You mean to tell me?" "Yes," Johnson cried. "It's him, my Richard, my boy." He broke down, covering his face with his shaking hands. "God forgive me. I lost everything. My home, my wealth, my peace, all because of my pride and the lies I believed. Now I see him, successful, respected, and I can't even call him my son." Just then, the door opened. Richard walked in with his driver, Patrick, behind him. Stella gasped and covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. The moment Johnson saw Richard standing there in his expensive Italian suit, with that calm authority and quiet grace, he almost collapsed. "Richard?" the old man whispered, his voice trembling like dry leaves in harmattan. Patrick quickly stepped aside, sensing that something deep and sacred was about to unfold. Raymond, still shocked, turned to Richard. "My son?" he said softly. "This man says he's your father." Richard froze. He looked at the frail old beggar, the once proud man who had called him useless, who had kicked him and his little sister out into the rain all those years ago. Slowly, Richard walked closer, his face unreadable. After a long silence, he said quietly, "He's grown older, but I know that face anywhere." His voice cracked slightly. "Yes, he's my father, Johnson Daniels." Raymond's eyes widened, and Stella began to sob uncontrollably. "Richard, my son," she cried, kneeling before him, "we wronged you. Please forgive us. I lied against you. I poisoned your father's mind with jealousy and pride. We've suffered for it, Richard. For 10 long years, we've begged for food and slept under bridges. Please, find it in your heart to forgive us." Richard took a deep breath, tears glistening in his eyes. "Mrs. Stella," he said calmly, "please stand up. Whatever happened between us is already in the past. I hold no hatred in my heart anymore." Johnson joined his wife on his knees, sobbing. "Richard, I failed you as a father. I let another woman turn my heart against my own blood. I drove you and your sister into the streets, thinking I was doing the right thing. I lost everything since that day. Every day I prayed God would give me a chance to see you again." Richard's lips trembled, and he turned away briefly to wipe his eyes. "The day you threw Anita and me out," he said, his voice low and pained, "I swore never to call you father again. But fate has a strange way of bringing people full circle. You see," he glanced toward Raymond, his voice softening, "this man, Raymond, The one who had no blood tie to us. Picked us up from the gutter, fed us, educated us, and believed in me when the world didn't. Everything I am today, the cars, the suits, the name, came because of him. So yes, I will take care of you both because you're my parents by blood, but the man I call father will always be Raymond. The room fell silent again. Johnson wept openly. Raymond, too, had tears running down his face. He walked over to Richard and placed a hand on his shoulder. "My son," he said softly, "you've shown what true greatness looks like. Forgiveness is the crown only the strong can wear." Stella sniffed and wiped her tears. "Please, Richard, can we see Anita? I need to beg her too before I die." Richard nodded gently. "She's on her way here. I already told her how I picked you from the street. You'll see her soon," he said. Then he looked at his real father, Johnson Daniels, not with hatred, but with quiet pity, and added, "And just so you know, I forgave you a long time ago. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have stopped that day when I saw you begging by the roadside. I would have driven off and pretended not to see you." Patrick, standing at the door, couldn't hold back a smile. "Oga," he said softly, "you get mindo. Not only big heart fit forgive like this." Richard chuckled faintly through his tears. "Sometimes, Patrick, forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final victory." And with that, the man once thrown out as a worthless boy stood tall. Not as the billionaire CEO, but as a son who chose grace over bitterness. The following afternoon, the mansion felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself carried the weight of memories best forgotten. The staff moved quietly, whispering to one another about the two strange visitors, who looked like they hadn't had a proper bath in years. Raymond sat in the living room, reading his newspaper, pretending not to notice the tension in the air. Beside him, Richard paced restlessly, glancing at the clock every few minutes. Patrick stood near the entrance, arms folded, watching the drama unfold with the calm curiosity of a man who had seen too much in Lagos traffic to be easily shocked. Then the sound of a car horn broke the silence. "She's here," Richard said softly. Moments later, the door opened, and Anita stepped in, dressed elegantly in a flowing, beautiful gown. Her husband, Kelvin, a tall, gentle man with kind eyes, followed behind her carrying a small bag. Anita's laughter filled the air as she greeted everyone, until her eyes landed on the two frail figures standing at the corner of the room. Her laughter died instantly. She froze. Her hand slowly dropped from the wave she had just given Raymond. The smile disappeared from her face, replaced by confusion, and then recognition. "Mama? Papa?" she whispered. Johnson and Stella flinched. They hadn't expected to hear those words again, at least not from her lips. Stella burst into tears immediately and fell to her knees. "My daughter, please," she sobbed. "We wronged you. Your father and I made a terrible mistake. We were blinded by lies and pride destroyed our home. Forgive us." Johnson tried to speak, but his voice cracked like old wood. "Anita," he croaked, "you've grown into a fine woman. You look just like your mother. God rest her soul. Every night I prayed to see you and your brother one last time, just to beg for forgiveness before I die." Anita's eyes filled with tears. Kelvin placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but she stepped forward slowly. "You threw us out into the street," she said quietly. "I remember that night like it happened yesterday. I held Richard's hand and begged you not to close the door, but you did. You watched us walk away into the rain with nothing but the clothes on our backs." Her words hit them like stones. Stella wailed loudly, clutching at her chest. Johnson fell on his knees beside her. "Yes, my daughter," he said, weeping uncontrollably. "We were heartless. I don't deserve to call you my child, but please, just say you forgive us. That's all this old man asks." For a moment, the room went still. Anita turned to look at her brother. Richard met her gaze and gave a small nod. And then, with tears rolling down her cheeks, she knelt beside them and said softly, "I forgave you a long time ago. Maybe not for you, but for me. Holding on to that pain was killing me inside. So yes, Papa, Mama Stella, I forgive you. The old couple broke down, crying and holding her hands as if afraid she might disappear again. Raymond's voice broke the silence. Now, that's what a true family looks like, he said, smiling through his own tears. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it can surely heal the future. Kelvin nodded in agreement. So Raymond is right, he said gently. They've found you both again, and that's what matters now. Johnson looked up, his eyes still red and swollen. We came only to ask forgiveness, he said. We never dreamed you would accept us. Now that our prayers have been answered, we can die in peace. Richard frowned. Die? Who said anything about dying? He said, half smiling, half scolding. You're not going anywhere, not while I'm alive. Stella blinked in confusion. You mean you'll let us stay? Stay? Richard chuckled. You're not just staying. You're part of this family again. Whether you like it or not, I'm responsible for you now. This mansion is big enough for everyone. Patrick snorted a laugh from the doorway. Ogadon talk finish. No be small forgiveness-o. This one a premium mercy package. Everyone burst into soft laughter through their tears. In the days that followed, the house went through a strange kind of silence. It wasn't the cold, awkward silence of strangers. It was the quiet of people trying to heal. Johnson and Stella hardly spoke at first, always keeping their heads bowed, moving around like guilty ghosts. Anita, now spending some time with them for bonding, ever the gentle heart, made sure they never felt unwanted. She would often bring food to their room herself, chatting softly until they smiled again. Richard, though quieter, would peek in sometimes, asking if they needed anything, though his tone always carried that subtle sarcasm only siblings recognize. Raymond, the wise old father of them all, would sit in the garden in the evenings, watching them talk again, like a family rediscovering its heartbeat. He'd smile and whisper to himself, "Blood may fail, but love never does." And slowly, painfully, beautifully, peace began to return to the Daniels household. Hello, beloved viewers. Thank you so much for watching today's emotional episode. What a journey of pain, forgiveness, and healing we've witnessed in the life of Richard Daniels and his family. Moral lessons. No matter how far life separates you from your loved ones, forgiveness can rebuild bridges that even time cannot destroy. Pride and greed can ruin homes, but humility and repentance can restore peace. Family is not always about blood. Sometimes it's about those who stand by you when the world turns its back. Never let anger make you lose the people who truly love you. Regret is a heavy burden to carry. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Like this video to encourage us to share more inspiring stories. Subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you won't miss any new episodes. And of course, drop your thoughts in the comment section, besties. Tell us what lesson you're taking home today, and in your own language too. Until next time, remember, love heals, forgiveness frees, and kindness never goes out of style. See you in the next story, besties.